Oh man, it's good. It's good seeing. Good evening to you. Welcome to Westside. We're glad that you're with us this evening for our worship time. If you joined us online, we're really glad that you came to us that way as well. If you're visiting with us, super glad that you came and want you to feel comfortable here at our devotional time and also our class time, which we'll be talking about here in just a moment. So Glad that you're here. I want to update you on those we need to remember in our prayers. First of all, I want to remember Janet Sneathen's brother, Dean Purcell, who has pancreatitis, and so certainly want to remember him. And I was talking with Ryan Dent this evening here, and his mother, Sharon Dent, is in the Southwest Medical Center in Liberal, Kansas. She has sepsis, and not only that, she fell and broke her nose, and so she's gone through a whole lot and just having a really tough time. So certainly want to remember Ryan's mother at this time as she spends some time in the hospital, and hopefully she will heal quickly there. Some other announcements that we want to let you know about our World Bible School teachers. There are 35 new enrollees for the World Bible School. And you're encouraged to see Cliff Barger if you can take some more students. So if you can, see Cliff, and he can help you with that. I also want to remind you it's time to begin collecting items for our Thanksgiving baskets. A list of those needed items will be in the bulletin this week, so look for that Sunday. And you can leave those donations that you bring, food donations, in the multi-purpose room. There we have some tables up against the north wall that you put those items on, and we'll have lists where each of those items go. And we'll also have a cart here in the foyer for your convenience as well, and we can have somebody take those back there. So keep that in mind to begin making those collections, and there could be a shortage on some of those items, so encourage you to go ahead and get some of those early. If you can help us out with that, that would be tremendous. Also, we've been mentioning the OU-TCU away game that is on Saturday, October 1st. We still have a couple of tickets available for that if you would like to go to that. We will be taking a van for those who need some transportation, and the cost for those tickets is $25. Okay, I think that is all the announcements, and so I want to let you know about tonight's classes. The university class taught by Don Wilson and John Crocker will be in the university room, so keep that in mind. That's on the book of James. And the auditorium class here, Paul in Acts, and Stuart England is teaching that class. And the overflow classroom, that's the men's class, Disciplines of a Godly Man, and Doug Wheeler will be teaching that. And the multipurpose room is the ladies' class, Christian Living at its Best. Jennifer will teach that class tonight. So tonight, leading our songs is Ryan Dent, and leading our prayers is his son Riley Dent. And I'll be giving some devotional thoughts in just a moment. So let's join in song as Ryan leads us, right?
Go ahead and stand for our first song here. Living for Jesus, my plan is true, striving to please Him in all that I do, giving allegiance recorded and free. This is a pathway of blessing, glory,
person. Please help those who are sick, and please let tonight bring us closer to God in the Lord's name.
Next song this evening is Beautiful Isle of Summer. Our song after the lesson will be This Will Love. Somewhere the sun is shining, somewhere the songbirds dwell. Hush in my sad reclining, God lives and all is well. Somewhere, somewhere, beautiful isle of somewhere, there
Well, if you are tuned in to World's Events, this has been a really pretty big week for those in England, as the Queen Elizabeth II, who was monarch for 70 years, she was laid to rest. The funeral was on Monday. And so now there is a new king, King Charles III. And so I think about these things, and I think about what great standing and how well loved and liked Queen Elizabeth was. And the whole time, she's just really been adored. And so what a tremendous length of time she was able to be queen, and now her son has taken the throne. And don't know very much about Charles. Know a few things, but it's going to be interesting to see how well he is liked. He's probably not going to be liked as well as his mother was liked. She was truly adored. And so nevertheless, they're still saying, God save the king. And so with all of these events and things happening, it makes us really think about how important royalty is to so many people, but how important royalty should be to the Christian. Because the king that we need to be focused on as Christians is the King of Kings, is the Lord of Lords, is the Son of God, Jesus Christ. He's the king. What we need is a king that will save us from our sins and from our iniquities, all of our failings and failures. We need a king who will save us. And we see that actually in Luke chapter 19, when we see the account of Zacchaeus. And at the end of that account, where we read about Zacchaeus, we see what Jesus really says to Zacchaeus, and then he says about himself in Luke chapter 19, verses 9, and Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. Salvation had come to the house of Zacchaeus because of the King of Kings, because of the Lord of Lords, because of Jesus Christ. And then verse 10, Jesus says, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Jesus came to save you. And there may be some that are saying, God save the king. But really and truly, I'm more like Peter, the Apostle Peter, when he stepped out of the boat onto water, walking toward Jesus, and then he starts to sink, and he says, Lord, save me. That's me. That's me. The one who needs just a little more faith. The one who needs not to doubt. The one who is absolutely 100% desperate for God in his life. And I'm the one who's saying, reaching out in desperation with all of my voice and all of my being, saying, Lord, save me. And what I need is for Jesus to reach out his hand and grab me and save me. Because the truth is, my friends, we live in a world that is troubled. A perfect world that God created, that man has taken a different direction. And because of that, truly what we need is like the Apostle Peter, who said, Lord, save me. What is it that you need this evening? Can we help you in some way? If we can, this is the opportunity as together we stand and sing.
This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid out somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord,
I've been summoned one road.
I didn't think about it. I said it was wrong.
You too. You too. I want to do that too. No, thanks so much.
Jesse, you're tardy. I threatened her I'd do that one day. All right, well, thank you all for being here again this evening, and we are going to pick up kind of sort of where we left off in Acts, studying again the life of Paul in Acts. We're going to be focused primarily on Acts chapter 14. Let me get where I'm going here. And talking about Paul in Lystra. So just to give a little bit of character and reminder, from last week we saw that Paul and Barnabas, I'm going to move that up just a little, that Paul and Barnabas were in Antioch of Pisidia, not Antioch in Syria, which is a completely different location. And we saw quite a lot coming out of that, particularly that the sermon that Paul gives was very reminiscent of something that we see in another place in Acts. Now, did anybody read the sermon in, I believe it was verse about 17 down through 41? Did anybody read that? Okay, some of you, good. The rest of you, no, I'm kidding, but seriously. Does anybody have any idea what that sermon sounds remarkably like? That's right. It is very close to what Stephen himself said. This same Stephen who Saul consented to his death. And here he is preaching a very similar sermon. Now that's really a neat connection there that we read in Acts 13. It's never ceases to amaze me just what God can do through people and how he can change lives. And Paul is, as we're studying, a great example of that. And here is a man who was persecuting the church, killing and consenting to the death of individuals. And here he is also, years later, sharing similar words to those he would have gladly stoned somebody for. It's amazing. Tonight we're going to be, like I said, talking about the activity that occurs in Lystra in Acts chapter 14. We're going to read verses 8 through 20. And there may be parts of this that as we're going through it, you may think, well, that's great for a historical perspective, but how in the world are we going to make any application out of this? Well, I promise you we will, because we always are going to try and do that. So let's go ahead and read Acts 14, 8 through 20. And in Lystra, a certain man without strength in his feet was sitting, a cripple from his mother's womb, who had never walked. This man heard Paul speaking. Paul observed him intently, and seeing that he had faith to be healed, said with a loud voice, "Stand up straight on your feet." And he leaped and walked. Now when the people saw what Paul had done, they raised their voices in the Lycaonian language, saying, "The gods have come down to us in the likeness of men." And Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. Then the priests of Zeus, whose temple was in front of their city, brought oxen and garlands to the gates, intending to sacrifice with the multitudes. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard this, they tore their clothes and ran in among the multitude, crying out and saying, "Men, why are you doing these things? We also are men with the same nature as you, and preach to you that you should turn from these useless things to the living God, who made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and all the things that are in them, who in bygone generations allowed all nations to walk in their own ways. Nevertheless, he did not leave himself without witness, in that he did good, gave us rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness." And with these things they could scarcely restrain the multitudes from sacrificing to them. Then, verse 19, the Jews from Antioch and Iconium came there, and having persuaded the multitudes, they stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing him to be dead. However, when the disciples gathered around him, he rose up and went into the city, and the next day he departed with Barnabas to Derbe. Okay, so remember, Antioch of Pisidia, Paul, Barnabas, they're teaching, and we read in Acts 13:42 that the Gentiles begged that these words might be preached to them the next Sabbath. They wanted to hear more. They wanted to hear more. But then we also read in Acts 13:45 that many of the Jews, though initially receptive, became envious when they saw the crowd that was starting to form around Paul and Barnabas that were listening to their words. And as a result, they opposed the things spoken by Paul. Well, great. So much for the work there in Antioch. It's time to go on. And so in response, Paul and Barnabas declared their intention to turn to the Gentiles, Acts 13:46. And the word of the Lord is getting spread to the whole region, 13:49. But every time they do, and every time they start making some inroads, the chief men of the city, we're talking about the Jews primarily here, raise up a persecution and run them out of wherever they are. And that's Acts 13, verse 15. So that leads them from Antioch of Pisidia, where they were having some success, it seemed, to now they're having to hit the road and make their way out of Antioch, instead to Lystra. Now, according to Eckhard J. Schnabel, say that 5 times fast, Lystra is located approximately 20 miles southwest of Iconium. Now, why is that important? Because of what this place is. Lystra was an older town. It was an older city in which Augustus, as in Caesar Augustus, formerly Octavian, had established as a military colony. And it actually acted kind of as a sister city to Pisidian Antioch. They were close enough, and so they were able to kind of share in a lot of the same glory, and were founded roughly at about the same time. But one thing to note, Lystra is a very prosperous city at this time. So whether or not, and this is an important point, whether or not Paul and Barnabas thought that by continuing to flee ahead of the persecution, they were going to somehow escape it, whether they thought that or not is irrelevant, because we're not told they think that. Instead, what we see is they just flee and they go. And when they get to Lystra, what do? Do they hide? Wait for the persecution to kind of, die down in Antioch, maybe we'll go back? No. Acts 14 and verse 7, right before the passage we read, says, let's back up to 6. They learned of it, fled to Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, and to the surrounding country. And verse 7, and there they continued to preach the gospel. They didn't stop. They kept going. They believed very seriously the words from Acts 13 and 47 that they were a light to the Gentiles. They took that responsibility incredibly seriously. And when they get here to Lystra, we see something really amazing happen, a genuine miracle. There is a man who is crippled we're told, without strength in his feet. So very clearly in some form of paraplegia. He cannot move his legs. He'd never walked. He's been like this since birth. Now, think back for a moment to this man's life in the first century. There is no welfare. There is no rehabilitation services that can find some kind of work for him to do. He's useless to people. You can't walk. You can't walk, can't work, can't work. Don't make money. If you don't make money, you can't eat. So, naturally, he's sitting there, and probably, we're not told here, but what we see in Acts 3 from the example there of that lame man with Peter and John, probably was sitting there because he's looking for a handout. There wouldn't have been a lot of care and concern for him, although we're not specifically told whether or not that occurs. What we are told is something very interesting. In verse 9, he listened to Paul speaking. Regardless of his circumstances, that's the verse to pick up on here. He's crippled from birth, never walked, but he's listening to Paul speaking. Now, when he hears all of this, he's looking right at Paul, and Paul looks right back at him. Now, what happens? Paul sees that he has the faith to be made well and says in a loud voice, and we'll get to that, stand upright on your feet. And what happens? The guy sits there, kind of moves around a little bit, kind of gets a little bit of foot. No, he leaps up and he starts walking. Immediacy is a hallmark of a genuine miracle. In the Gospel of Mark, we do see one phased miracle with the blind man who, Jesus gives him a little bit, and then I see people walking around, but they kind of look like trees, and then finally he's healed. There's a reason for that. We're not going to get into it. And we probably don't know the full extent of that and the reasoning for it, but what we do know is almost every single other miracle recorded, it's immediate. Because if it's gradual, now you start kind of putting in an area of doubt. Well, maybe he wasn't really as lame as we thought he was. Maybe God's power could, maybe fix his ankles if that's what the problem was, but clearly he's still struggling to walk, so I don't know how powerful this God is. No, this is an immediate, powerful miracle. One thing that is important to note that has been misconstrued out of this passage so bad is in verse 9 when it says, Paul looking intently at him and seeing that he had faith to be made well. Wow, have people run with that. Oh, well, if you just believe a little harder, I can heal you of whatever disease you've got, right? How many of those people are on TV? Maybe not so much anymore. Hope not. And lo and behold, if they can't heal somebody, well, they just don't have enough faith. They just don't have enough faith. That has nothing to do with this passage, okay? We see Jesus heal people regardless of their faith. In John 5, there's a man that is healed. In Acts 3, there is a man that is healed, and both of these individuals are not mentioned as having faith to be healed. So what are we talking about here? Why would this be in here? Luke, why are you recording this? What was going on first? He was listening to Paul. Faith, remember, the Greek word here is pistis. We're talking about conviction. He knew. He was listening, and he knew what Paul and Barnabas could do. He was starting to get it. He could have been healed without it. Let's make that abundantly clear. He could have been healed without it. This is being noted here because it was not for the healing of his body. It was not requisite for the miracle, this faith of his, but rather for the healing of the soul. That's why this is being mentioned. This man is not simply watching these guys pass by and, hey, help me out, boom, you're healed. No, this is a man who is starting to understand it. He's developing faith. The miracle was not contingent on his faith at all. It was necessary for healing, not of the body, but of the soul. Verse 10 is important here because Paul is addressing this man, and he very, very subtly said, all right, go ahead and get up, right? Is that what we read in verse 10? No! It says in a loud voice, stand upright on your feet. Probably didn't say it quite like that. And he sprang up and began walking, the ESV translation there. This loud voice was purposeful. One thing you're going to learn, if we haven't learned it already with Paul, purpose. Everything he does is purposed. Everything he does is intentional. He's thinking through it, paying attention to his surroundings, and doing what is necessary. In this case, he wants to draw attention. But is he drawing attention to himself? No. He's drawing attention to this miracle. Because if this is seen and can't be denied, it will be exactly what a miracle is supposed to do, which is confirmation of the Word. It is confirmation of the power of God through the gospel. What Paul and Barnabas are preaching, are not just empty words. They're not just another philosophy, another theology. These are powerful, life-giving words, and the fact that this miracle was then witnessed by this crowd added credence to the reality of it. It was undeniable what had just happened. And so what does the crowd do? They react. What would we do if we saw something like that? I hope we'd react. I hope it's not mundane. It's just another guy getting healed. What kind